The war had no beginning that anyone could remember, and it seemed to have no end. Across the galaxy, two great empires clashed in a storm of fire and steel, destroying worlds and scattering ashes into the void. Entire star systems became nothing, more than graveyards of shattered fleets drifting endlessly in silence. The war consumed everything it touched: civilizations, cultures, and hope itself. Soldiers were born into the fight, raised with weapons in their hands, and buried under the rubble of forgotten victories. Generations lived and died without ever knowing peace. Even machines designed only to obey and kill began to hesitate, their circuits confused by the endless orders to destroy. For countless centuries the war dragged on, fueled not by purpose but by hatred that had long outlived its reason. The empires fought not to win but to make sure the other would never stand again. And so the galaxy bled without pause. Planets that had once shone with life were stripped bare. Their oceans boiled away. Their skies turned to smoke. Cities collapsed under orbital bombardments, and the survivors lived like shadows in the ruins, hunted by armies that never rested. For the common people of the galaxy, there was no side to choose. There was no safe place. To them, both empires were monsters, each as cruel and merciless as the other. Some tried to hide, building colonies in forgotten corners of the stars. Others surrendered themselves to whichever army reached them first, hoping slavery might at least mean survival. Yet no matter what path they chose, the war always found them. The galaxy had become a prison of violence, and the stars themselves seemed cursed. In the dark corners of space, whispers began to spread, rumors of a forgotten world, a planet that neither empire had bothered to claim. The soldiers laughed when they heard it. How could any world escape notice in a galaxy torn apart by war? Commanders dismissed the stories as lies, nothing but the desperate hope of refugees. But refugees, after centuries of running, learned to hear truths in whispers. They spoke of a blue world, a place untouched by the endless conflict, hidden far from the roots of war. A world called Earth. To the empires it was nothing. To the survivors, it was a dream. Some said the people of Earth were strange and wild. Some claimed they were dangerous. Most thought they were simply another primitive race destined to be crushed if the war ever reached their skies. No one believed these humans could matter. No one believed they could change the course of history. And yet the whispers kept spreading. Something was different about them. Something that made the galaxy uneasy. Meanwhile, the war raged on without pause. Fleets collided in endless battles, entire armadas erased in flashes of light. Weapons grew larger, more destructive, until even suns were shattered in the crossfire. But no matter how powerful the empires became, they remained locked in stalemate. Every victory was paid with equal defeat. Every world gained was lost again within years. The galaxy itself seemed tired, groaning under the weight of constant destruction. Refugees prayed for something, anything, to break the cycle. But the gods of the stars remained silent. Only the war spoke, and its voice was endless thunder. In one shattered sector, a convoy of broken ships limped through the void. They were not soldiers, only families fleeing from the ashes of their worlds. Their vessels were barely holding together, their engines coughing smoke, their supplies long gone. They had no destination, only the hope of finding a place the war had not yet claimed. And against all odds they stumbled across it, a small blue planet circling an ordinary star. It should have been nothing. It should have been just another nameless rock. But when they scanned it, they found something they had not seen in centuries. Oceans that glittered, skies that breathed, forests alive with green. And then, they found humans. The refugees expected fear, suspicion, or hostility. Instead, they were welcomed. The humans gave them food, shelter, and medicine. They offered kindness in a galaxy where kindness had died long ago. But there was something unsettling about them too. They were not like other species. Their eyes held a strange fire, their hands built machines with speed and precision. Their voices carried a determination the refugees had never heard before. The humans listened to the tales of endless war, And though they had never faced the empires, their jaws tightened with anger. The war was not theirs, yet they spoke as if it was already personal. They asked questions no one dared to ask. Why must the war continue? Why must entire galaxies burn for pride? And what would it take to finally end it? The refugees could not answer. No one could. But in that silence, the humans made a decision of their own. A decision that would one day shake the stars. No one knew it yet. Not the refugees who found safety. Not the empires who continued their slaughter. Not even the humans themselves. But something had shifted. A hidden world had been discovered. A sleeping force had been awakened. For the first time in centuries, the war had met something new. And though the galaxy did not yet understand, it soon would. Because the humans were not just another race lost in the fire. They were a storm waiting to break. And once they stepped into the war, nothing would ever be the same again. The first meeting between humans and the galaxy did not happen with warships or armies. It began with broken vessels, refugees drifting. Through the void, their ships cracked in bleeding air. They had no weapons left, no strength to fight, and no hope to offer. When their sensors picked up the strange blue planet, they expected nothing. Perhaps another barren rock. Perhaps one more false hope. But desperation pushed them forward. They entered orbit, and what they saw stunned them. Oceans shimmered like jewels. Vast forests stretched across continents, and cities glowed with light. Life thrived here, untouched by centuries of galactic war. It was a paradise in the middle of hell. And then, the humans came. The refugees prepared for fear. They had been chased, hunted, enslaved by every empire. Why would these people be different? Yet, when human ships appeared, sleek but modest compared to the galaxy's monstrous dreadnoughts, they did not open fire. Instead, they opened their hangars. Supplies were sent, food and water, medicine, tools. Humans spoke words of welcome, not threats. It was something the refugees had forgotten: mercy. At first, they laughed. Humans looked fragile. Their world seemed simple, backward, untouched by the grand technologies of the empires. They had no fleets of 1,000 ships, no weapons that could tear stars apart. How could such a small, primitive species matter? But laughter faded as the refugees stayed longer. They saw how humans worked, how fast they learned, how easily they adapted. A human engineer who had never seen alien technology before repaired a refugee engine in less than a day. Human soldiers, with weapons far less advanced, trained refugees to fight with precision the galaxy had never imagined. And when humans spoke of war, their eyes burned with something strange. Not hatred, not greed, but determination. Rumors spread quickly. The galaxy, even broken by war, still had ears. Whispers carried from traitor to smuggler, from smuggler to soldier. There was a world untouched by fire, a world with strange people who welcomed strangers, a world called Earth. The empires heard too, but they dismissed it as nonsense. To them, humans were insects, too small to notice, too weak to matter. But weakness can be an illusion. And humans had perfected the art of being underestimated. One night, as the refugees rested in human shelters, a fleet approached Earth's borders. It was not an invasion, only a patrol of one empire searching for survivors to enslave. But to the refugees, it meant death. They trembled, expecting the humans to hide, to surrender, to beg for mercy. Instead, humanity revealed a different face. Earth's leaders gathered quickly, speaking in sharp, short sentences. Plans formed with incredible speed. Ordinary men and women, civilians with no history of galactic war, stepped forward to fight. When the alien fleet entered the system, they expected silence. Instead, they found chaos. Chaos designed with purpose. Human ships swarmed them in strange patterns, their movements reckless, unpredictable. Mines drifted where no mines should be. Decoys flashed across the void, pulling enemy ships into traps. To the galaxy's armies, war was tradition, bound by rules, strategies carved into stone. To humans, war was a puzzle, and they were the ones who loved solving puzzles. The alien commander laughed at first. How could these primitive ships challenge him? But then his laughter turned to confusion, then to panic. His fleet's sensors showed ghosts where there should be none. His ships fired at illusions while real human weapons struck from the shadows. His formation collapsed. His orders failed. And in less than an hour, a fleet that had crushed dozens of worlds was reduced to silence. Only wreckage drifted above Earth. The refugees watched in awe. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had seen weapons that split suns, but they had never seen anything like this. Humans did not fight with numbers. They did not fight with power. They fought with creativity, with madness, with something the galaxy did not even have a word for. Some called it cunning. Others called it insanity. But the humans had another name for it: strategy. When the battle ended, the humans did not celebrate. They repaired their ships, rescued survivors, and gave aid even to the alien prisoners. To them, it was not a victory to boast about. It was simply survival. But to the galaxy, the message was clear. A new player had stepped onto the board. A player that no one understood. A player that no one could predict. For the first time in centuries, the endless war had a new voice. Small, quiet but sharp as a blade. The empires ignored it, too proud to believe. The refugees whispered it, too frightened to say it loud. But history had already shifted. The galaxy had just seen the first move of a species that never played fair. The humans had made contact, and the game would never be the same again. When news of the battle spread, most of the galaxy refused to believe it. A patrol fleet destroyed by primitives? Impossible, they said. Surely the aliens had been ambushed by another empire, or their commander had been incompetent. No one could imagine that humans had done it. But the refugees had seen it with their own eyes, and they carried the truth with them like a secret flame. They whispered of humans who fought without rules, who turned chaos into a weapon. And soon, more fleets would learn that this was no rumor. The next time the empires came, they came prepared. A larger fleet, commanded by veterans who had fought in 100 battles, entered Earth's space. They did not come quietly. They announced their arrival with fire, burning through satellites, destroying anything in their path. To them, it was not just war, it was punishment. They would make an example of Earth, a warning to any who dared defy them. But humans did not tremble. They watched. They studied. And then they smiled. Because for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Humans did not build ships like the empires. They did not care for size or tradition. Instead, they focused on speed, stealth, and adaptability. They turned cargo ships into war machines. They strapped weapons onto anything that could fly. They built decoys out of scrap metal. Where the empires saw chaos, humans saw opportunity. Every mistake became a trap. Every weakness became a weapon. And when the enemy entered range, Earth unleashed a storm unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The battle was not fought with strength, but with deception. Human ships darted through asteroid fields, drawing enemy fire into rocks that shattered fleets. They overloaded their own engines to create bursts of radiation that blinded enemy sensors. They fired weapons in strange patterns, confusing targeting systems. Some ships pretended to be crippled, luring enemies close before detonating hidden charges. The Empire's commanders screamed in fury. Nothing made sense. The humans were not following the rules of war, but that was the secret. Humans had never cared for rules. One refugee commander, watching from the ground, whispered in fear, "They fight like predators, not soldiers." And he was right. Humanity did not battle like an empire. They fought like hunters, unpredictable, cunning, ruthless. They studied their prey, learned its patterns, and then struck where it hurt most. Every move was designed to confuse, to break discipline, to make the enemy doubt their own eyes. And in war, doubt was deadlier than any weapon. By the time the battle ended, the Empire's fleet was in ruins. Only a handful of ships escaped, limping back to carry the shameful tale. To the galaxy, it was unthinkable. A backwater world had humiliated one of the great powers. The empires told their people it was luck, nothing more. But luck does not repeat itself, and Earth's victories were only beginning. As the war dragged on elsewhere, humans began to step beyond their planet. They sent small fleets into neighboring systems, not to conquer but to test. They studied enemy responses, learning faster than any species had a right to. They created strategies the galaxy had never imagined, strategies born not from tradition, but from desperation. For humans had a gift that the galaxy had long forgotten. They understood survival. Their entire history had been one of struggle, of wars and famines, of enemies stronger and more advanced. And every time they had endured, every time they had adapted. Now they carried that legacy into the stars. But the strangest part was not how they fought, it was why they fought. The empires waged war for dominance, for revenge, for pride. Humans fought for none of these. They fought for survival, yes. But they also fought for those who could not fight for themselves. Refugees, broken species, forgotten colonies. Earth took them in. To humanity, protecting the weak was not weakness. It was strength, and that made them dangerous, because they were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for everyone who had been crushed under the weight of the endless war. The galaxy did not understand it yet, but a shift had begun. For centuries, war had been predictable. Battles followed patterns, strategies repeated again and again. But now, with humans, the game had changed. Their creativity spread like fire. Small rebellions began to copy their tactics. Refugee fleets fought back using human strategies. And with every victory, the legend grew. The empires tried to crush the rumors, but fear is a seed that grows in silence. Soldiers whispered about Earth in the dark, afraid that the next battle would bring the humans. Commanders studied human tactics and found themselves unable to predict them. For the first time in centuries, the empires felt something new: doubt. And Earth? Earth was just getting started. They had tasted war, and though it burned, they had discovered something powerful. Against all odds, against all reason, they could win, and that truth spread faster than any fleet. Because once humans entered the battlefield, the galaxy's rules no longer applied, and the war that no one could stop had finally found its disruptors. The galaxy had seen many battles, but none like the one that came to be known as the Battle of the Black Nebula. For centuries, the empires had fought in endless stalemate, throwing fleets at each other like waves against a cliff. But when the humans arrived, they brought with them something no one expected: a storm of unpredictability. This battle would prove it to all. The Black Nebula was a graveyard of ancient wars, its clouds of dust and shattered rock drifting through the void like the bones of forgotten giants. No empire dared to fight there. Sensors failed in its shadows, signals twisted, and entire fleets could vanish in the haze. But when the human fleet, small and outnumbered, was cornered, they chose the nebula willingly. To the empires, it looked like desperation. To the humans, it was opportunity. The enemy entered with confidence. Over 2,000 warships bristling with weapons, engines glowing like suns. Against them, humanity had less than 200 ships, many of them retrofitted freighters and hastily built carriers. On paper, it was suicide. The Empire's commander laughed as he ordered his ships forward. He expected a quick, merciless slaughter. Instead, he entered a nightmare. The nebula twisted light and sound, but the humans knew this and had planned for it. They used the clouds as cover, hiding their movements. They dropped decoys that mimicked entire fleets. They created echoes of signals that led enemy ships deeper into traps. From the darkness, human ships struck quickly, then vanished before anyone could return fire. To the Empire, it felt as if shadows themselves were fighting. The enemy tried to adapt, spreading their fleet wide, but that only made them weaker. Humans struck in small groups, cutting apart isolated ships, then disappearing again. Panic spread through the Empire's ranks. Discipline broke. Commanders screamed into their comms only to find their messages jammed or twisted into nonsense. Some ships even turned their guns on each other, deceived by human tricks. Hours passed, and what should have been a simple victory turned into chaos. The Empire's massive fleet found itself bleeding ship by ship, death by 1,000 cuts. When they finally managed to regroup, they realized something horrifying. Half their armada was gone. Half, destroyed by a force so small it should never have mattered. The humans had not just survived. They had humiliated one of the galaxy's greatest powers. News of the battle spread faster than any fleet. Refugees whispered of it in secret. Soldiers muttered about it in the dark. Even commanders who refused to believe the rumors could not ignore the reports. A primitive world had destroyed an empire's fleet in one of the most dangerous battlefields in the galaxy. And they had done it not with strength but with something far deadlier: strategy. For the first time in centuries, the endless war stopped for a heartbeat. The empires did not admit defeat, but they began to look over their shoulders. No longer did they see only each other. Now they saw Earth, and what they saw terrified them. Because humans did not fight for territory or pride. They did not fight for domination. They fought with a purpose the galaxy had long forgotten. They fought for survival, for freedom, and for those who could not protect themselves. And that made them unpredictable. That made them dangerous. On Earth, the victory was not celebrated with cheers. The humans returned to their repairs, burying their dead and preparing for the next battle. To them, the war was far from over. They knew the empires would return, stronger, angrier, more desperate than before. But humanity had learned something important at the Black Nebula. They had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that they could win. The refugees who had once doubted Earth now pledged themselves to the human cause. More broken fleets limped toward the blue planet, seeking safety and finding inspiration. Where once they had only run, now they began to fight back, armed with human strategies. Slowly, the galaxy's hopeless began to rise. But not everyone was pleased. Deep within the empires, whispers turned to fear, and fear turned to anger. The rulers, proud and unyielding, could not allow this insult to stand. They gathered their strength, forging alliances with rivals they once swore to kill, united by one goal: the destruction of Earth. And so, the war that no one could stop began to shift. For centuries, it had been a battle of giants, crushing everything between them. Now a new player had stepped in. A small, underestimated world had broken the cycle. The turning point had come, and the galaxy could feel it in every shadow. What began as whispers was now a storm. Humanity had changed the game, and the empires, once unshakable, trembled in silence. The galaxy had always believed war could never end. It had become a cycle, endless and cruel, feeding on pride and hatred until nothing was left. But when humanity entered the battlefield, the cycle cracked. The Black Nebula proved it. The impossible had happened. Giants had fallen to a world the empires had once ignored. And though the empires tried to deny it, they could not silence the truth. A new game had begun, and the humans were the ones holding the pieces. At first, the galaxy thought the humans would seize power, carving an empire of their own. That was the way of all species before them: fight, conquer, dominate. But humans were different. They did not send fleets to enslave. They did not burn planets to ash. Instead, they sent messages to refugees, to scattered colonies, to broken worlds that had long since given up hope. And the message was simple: you are not alone anymore. Worlds that had hidden for centuries began to emerge. Species that had been enslaved started to resist, not because humanity forced them, but because humanity inspired them. The sight of a small planet standing against empires gave courage to those who had none. And so, the galaxy began to change, not through conquest but through unity, something the empires could not understand. But humanity was not naive. They knew the empires would not accept this new order. Already, vast armadas were being forged, alliances of enemies who once tried to destroy each other. Their hatred for one another was nothing compared to their fear of Earth. And so they planned, gathering strength, vowing that humanity would burn. Yet fear has a way of weakening even the strongest hands. The empires, for the first time in centuries, hesitated. They wondered, what if we cannot win? On Earth, preparations never stopped. Factories roared, ships were built, weapons designed. But even more powerful than the machines was the human mind. They invented strategies no alien could predict. They trained not only soldiers but ordinary people, teaching them to fight in ways that broke every law of galactic warfare. Where others saw rigid battle lines, humans saw possibilities. Where others saw defeat, humans saw opportunity. And the more the empires studied them, the less sense they made. The galaxy had once laughed at the idea of humans joining the war. Now they whispered another truth: the humans could end the war. Not by crushing everything in their path, but by making the game itself impossible for the empires to play. Because in every battle, humans forced them to fight differently, forced them to question everything they had ever believed about war. The rules that had chained the galaxy for centuries were crumbling, and humanity was the hammer. Then came the moment that sealed it. A vast fleet, larger than anything seen before, was sent to destroy Earth. Every empire ship that could still fight was gathered, their leaders certain this would be the end. It was not just an attack. It was an execution. The humans would be erased and the galaxy would return to its endless cycle. But when the fleet arrived, they found no easy prey. Earth was ready, not with more ships, not with greater firepower, but with something far deadlier: preparation. The humans had studied every tactic the empires used. They had learned every pattern, every weakness. And when the battle began, the galaxy discovered the final truth. Humanity did not simply fight wars. Humanity rewrote them. The sky burned. Empires that had once stood eternal broke apart in confusion. Fleets that had conquered worlds crumbled under human cunning. And when the battle ended, silence fell across the stars. The invincible had been defeated. The war that no one could stop had been stopped, not by strength, not by size, but by a species the galaxy had never taken seriously. In the aftermath, the galaxy stood on the edge of something new. The empires, bloodied and broken, could no longer claim dominance. Refugees in broken worlds now had a protector, a leader, a spark of hope. Humanity did not claim victory for themselves. They offered it to all who wished to live free of endless war. They had shown that survival was not enough. Freedom was possible. Peace was possible. And so the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. Wars may seem endless. Empires may appear unbreakable. But all it takes is one species with the will to change the rules, one world brave enough to stand, one decision to say no more. Humanity had been dismissed as irrelevant, yet they became the force that turned despair into hope, chaos into order, and war into something entirely new. The galaxy would never be the same. And deep within the silence after battle, one truth echoed across the stars: when humans step into the game itself changes forever.